Welcome to the Influence Experiment, where we seek to explore the art and the science of building influential capacity. Every month, we want to raise thought-provoking ideas of how you can be an investor of the influence you carry. If you're ready to journey with us, then it's time to experiment.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Influence Experiment as we continue to learn how to invest our influence well. I'm so excited about the topic that we are going to discuss today. We are talking about fostering a productive environment. Living realistically in healthy work environments, families, and teams seems harder and harder to come by. And so we live in a culture that's hyper driven by technology, social media, growth goals, impatience, pursuit of individual fame, burnout, political unrest, and the list can go on and on and on. Is a healthy family, work environments, and even individualism, even realistic? Through a difficult tension point, we feel that there is an answer amidst the tension. And this is why we want to have a conversation around fostering constructive and positive work environments and atmospheres that support healthy relationships. And so I have invited Robert Crowther to help speak towards this topic today. And so, Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Tony.
I'm so excited for you to be here to join us today. So, hey, would you be willing just to give us a little bit about yourself before we dive in?
Sure. So I would start off professionally. My job actually revolves around identifying and evaluating leaders for businesses. So I guess the affectionate term that's used for my profession is headhunter. But I've been doing that work for over 20 years now. And one of the things that's really important is my ability to evaluate somebody's personal and interpersonal skills, because that's really important for a leader to be effective at leading a team to success. And we all have the opportunity to be formal and sometimes informal leaders in our lives. And the biggest question sometimes is, do we use that role of influence or to influence well? And then personally, I would say that I am married to my best friend, and I can't imagine spending my life or sharing my life with anybody else. The thing is, we're very different, but we both respect the differences that we bring. So it's very complementary versus there being contention in the relationship. For me, I love art, I love music, I love flowers, but I also enjoy the taste of blood and adrenaline occasionally. And I think that those two extremes bring me a little bit of balance that makes me a little bit of a whole individual. And
Yeah.
we have a total of 7 children. We got 2 dogs and soon to be 9 grandchildren. So that's a little about me.
Come on, 9 grandchildren.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations with that. What
It's all in the beard.
oh that love it. Well, hey, again, Robert, man, thanks so much for being willing to come on and talk about this. I'm stoked because of some of your credentials and some of your experience around that that you get to help dialogue over this necessary conversation, right? As we kind of speak towards this tension of healthiness, realism, productiveness, again within families and work environments, etc. And so, hey, as we start off though, would you be able to answer this? Whether comical or serious, what's something that just automatically puts you into this like productive, happy, healthy mood?
Well, the first things that come to mind as I just think about things that make me happy. Um, I enjoy activities with my wife. I mean, we have a tandem bike that we take rides together. So being able to ride around the countryside on the bike, it's just just even thinking about it makes me smile. We also do ballroom dancing, which
Oh
we
wow.
enjoy doing, and that always puts me in a happy mood. We do work together in the yard, so the planting and getting dirty and making the yard look beautiful, that's something that also puts me in a happy mood.
Mm,
Um, I enjoy cooking, so we cook together, and that's a lot of fun. And I would say probably the last thing is playing on the worship team also brings me a
Mm,
great deal of joy. So even if I've had a long, hard day, and it's time to go practice, I always come home in a much better mood.
mm. Yeah, I love that. I just love hearing you like list all those things that you do with your wife, right? To be able to do those things with her and community with her is like, I don't know, it's just that's awesome. I'm so comforted to hear that. And so, and then obviously they man seeing you up on the stage for the worship team playing bass like is just always such a fun. I don't know. It's a fun delight to watch people go up there serving with their gifts and talents. And so, thanks for doing it in that way. And so, hey, what would you say is like fostering a productive environment? Why is that so crucial for healthy relationships?
Well, simply put, healthy relationships can't blossom in a toxic environment. And I think the pandemic has really made it even clearer the importance of building and maintaining healthy relationships. As human beings, we're more interconnected and interdependent than we sometimes care to admit or that we're wise enough to even recognize.
Hmm. No, I couldn't agree more with that, and so like it's yeah, we are super interconnected. As we talked about, technology is it binds us more than sometimes we would like,
Mm,
and so how do we deal with our interconnectedness and our interdependence? That's not a bad thing, but it has the potential to be it can be unhealthy, but it also has some really healthy elements to it. And so, kind of finding that striking that balance is kind of the tension point, but I think it's necessary to be able to seek through that. So what would you say is like kind of fostering what makes it difficult? And I kind of spoke maybe to one piece of it, but like fostering a productive atmosphere, what makes that difficult?
well, that's a loaded question. I would say that some of the things that probably get in the way, when I think of it, it's our egos and our pride. There's this element of wanting to be right. There's a reward in our hearts when we're right about something. So
Mm,
sometimes we desire to be right, versus seeking the truth or strengthening a relationship through a conversation.
mm,
Our faulty logic, some of the cognitive biases that we as human beings, all of us wind up having. We also have blind spots that we're not aware of
mm,
all the time. I would say that our misapplied decision shortcuts that we sometimes making, sometimes the technical term for that is our heuristics or our rule of thumb.
mm,
Those things don't apply in all situations, but we still wind up, applying some of these decision shortcuts in the way that we deal with people.
uh,
Sometimes we're impatient. We just don't take the time to have the conversation with somebody, and our impatience
mm,
sometimes makes it difficult. I would also say that our lack of emotional intelligence, being able to not only manage our own emotions, but be able to recognize the emotions in the room and be able to manage those things effectively. And I would say also that we bring baggage, from past hurts. And the list just goes on about all the things that get in the way of being able to foster a productive atmosphere.
oh man, and unfortunately, I would say that it seems like there's a lot more things that go against like make it more difficult to pursue fostering a productive environment and because there's so many negative things that can come against us. So I mean, you just listed off like 10 things, right? And there's like exorbitant amount of more things that could, and the deck is stacked against us, right? Like it seems like it almost feels like we can't win sometimes. And so like yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things again. If we're not careful, it can almost like spiral us into like this like hopelessness even, right? Like sometimes you can feel like that.
Well, what I would say is that realize that it is not a destination that you will ever get to, but it is a process and a way of living your life. So,
Mm,
it's not a place that, oh, I've arrived. I'm never
yeah.
going to have conflict. I'm always going to be perfect. Perfection is not to be achieved in this life,
Mm,
but having the right mindset and continually working towards improving and trying to apply those things even when we fail, I think is really important. That's the mindset that it's about getting better at it, not that I'll ever be perfect at it.
wow. Yeah, no, well said. And another way that someone had shared that with shared that a similar thought with me, that it's not about perfection, it's about progress. That
Hmm.
every day we're making a step, intentional step in progress. And so I think that's a good frame of mind to have. And so, hey, what would you say are some of the tells or of a healthy, productive relationship, whether it is your work, a team, or even family related? What would some tells that you'd say?
Yeah. So when I look at a group and I see things like there's elements of trust and respect, in a marriage relationship or in a family or in a work situation, there's elements of trust and respect that are there. I would also say that there's care and concern for the other party. Clearly you want to also protect yourself from somebody that's being malicious, but it's about also caring about and having concern for the other party. Um, there's also this element of psychological safety and humility that I think makes it safe. It allows for some crucial conversations to take place, which really is an opportunity to build stronger relationships. And, I think of crucial conversations of, when the stakes are high, opinions vary, and emotions run strong. And those are really really crucial conversations, and I think in a healthy space you can have those. And I would say there's also an element of curiosity over certitude. When I say certitude, it's like sometimes we walk into something with a dogmatic certainty that something is some way. This person did this, where, what, maybe having a little authentic curiosity over being just so certain that something happened also, I think, is an element that really is a tell of productive relationships. And I would say one thing that one of the bosses I worked with at Aetna, Ron Williams, had this saying. He said, assume positive intent. So even though we might have some tense conversations or try to resolve some issues, you want to assume positive intent versus thinking somebody's out to get you. You know. And then the final thing I would say is there's this element of wanting to understand before being understood. And I think that goes along with that authentic curiosity that I had mentioned. You want to really understand the other person's perspective before you want to try to force your views on them.
I couldn't agree more. That's some incredibly great wisdom to share, because like I think even you speaking towards curiosity over certainty is like, we all need to be reminded of that, because we so often we really think we have the right opinions or the right perspective or the vantage point, and to have this curiosity of like, oh, I could be wrong or I don't
Mhm.
have all the answers, right? And
Yeah, that's that
so
humility,
yeah, right.
recognizing that you're not omniscient.
Right. Wait, you mean I'm not omniscient? um,
Oops.
like, like, but we think this, right? Like on a daily basis, intentionally or unintentionally, we're bad at putting ourselves in another person's shoes, or again, having this curiosity of seek to understand rather than be understood. And I just think that you speak towards a huge tell of what a healthy, productive environment looks like, is that curiosity over content, assuming the best rather than assuming the worst, maybe. I think
Hmm.
is like super necessary. And so now let's flip the script then. What would you say are some tells of an unhealthy or toxic environment, family, team, etc.?
Yeah, you can see those at arm's length too. you know, when I would say that some of the descriptors or some of the tells about those, you're going to find that there's contempt, there's a belittling and name calling that goes on. There are lies, deception, and hidden agendas. In an unhealthy relationship, there's manipulation and bullying that takes place, and the manipulation is sometimes hurt people. So sometimes
Yeah. Mhm.
that was the way that we were treated as a child or what have you, and we just used that to try to get our way. But manipulation and bullying, those are things that are toxic and not healthy.
Mhm.
Um, we also have this fight or flight thing instinct in us, and it is a purely physiological thing that occurs when we feel threatened. And so that sometimes will turn into hot aggression, or it'll also turn into cold withdrawal, where we just withdraw as opposed to, engaging. And, that's not healthy either. And I would say that, when we immediately dismiss somebody or invalidate another person's perspective without taking the time to listen to it, those are also tells of an unhealthy relationship. So those are just a couple of things that come to mind when I think of that question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you think about, again, the idea of that fight or flight, I like how you put the words behind it of this like hot aggression or cold withdrawal. I think that's kind of a good way to think through the lens of fight or flight. And those are usually like those are impulsive responses. They're easier usually, right? It's
Mhm.
harder to like lean into it and into the conversation, into the person, to the circumstance, and again, that seek to understand posture rather than seek to be understood. It's usually uncomfortable, right? To like
Yeah.
do and yet those are these really are some of the tells that you've spoken to here really are like speak towards unhealthiness or toxic environments. And I think that we need to be taking a critical look at ourselves with that. Like, hey, like, do I have a tendency to fight or flight? Do I have a tendency to lie or deceive or have a hidden agenda to manipulate or to bully? But we don't like doing that. We don't like addressing the things that we.
It's always easier to see it outside of you than in you.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Truer words have never been spoken, right? And so, but we need to, like, if we're
Yeah.
going to be better leaders, if we're going to be better influencers, we have to acknowledge that we're not perfect and we
Yeah.
make mistakes and that we could be a contributor to unhealthiness. And no one wants to be, right. I don't know anyone who's, I want to be a contributor to unhealthiness. And so are we willing to have some accountability in our life to critically think through some of these questions? And so, as we think about, again, continuation of healthiness and even realism, what would you say are there moments where you have to discern if you're going to prioritize healthiness over realism or vice versa?
It's interesting. That question is here. I think it's more about the and instead of
Mm,
the or. And when you create the situation where you try to make both of those things exist as opposed to it being diametrically opposed where it's one or the other, I think the and is the one that gives us the better answer and gives us a little bit more success. So I believe that candor and compassion can coexist. And I don't think we throw one out for the other. I don't think we drop truth bombs just because it was the truth. You need to deliver that truth with compassion and care, versus just dropping it and using it as a weapon.
And I think another way that we could speak towards that, even in the biblical framework, is the idea of speaking truth in love, as
Hmm.
Ephesians 4 talks about. But I think you beautifully said candor and compassion. And those are absolutely both necessary. And I think that that's again another great framework to have, where there's healthiness in compassion, there's healthiness in thinking through candor, but there's also realistic perspective that we need to have both of those as well. And you can't just pitch one or the other, like, oh, it's all grace and no truth, or no truth and no grace. And so
Mm.
that middle ground, I think, is super necessary. And to speak with candor, with also is also compassion,
Yeah.
is a really good way to kind of think through that. And so, realistically, though, healthiness within a family or team or work is not always completely possible. We'd love to think that it is. We'd love to think it's all daisies and roses, but the reality is it's not always, right? What
Yeah.
do you do with that when it's not perfect, when you feel like unhealthiness is creeping in or is already there? And how does one manage that tension?
Yeah. I would say in most situations, we still need to try to build bridges, and not walls. And not all tension is necessarily bad. Um, you know, when you think about a bridge, for example, it takes compression and tension in
Mm,
order for a bridge to actually stand. And so the only way to manage the tension is actually with courage, wisdom, and self awareness.
mm,
um, you have to manage your own emotions. You have to be aware of whether or not you're pouring toxicity into this conversation or not. So that self awareness, I think, is something that's really important. So we need the courage, not to retreat.
mm,
We need the courage not to attack, We need the courage to love the way God loves, which is very sacrificial, more so than we want to be. And we also need the wisdom to, again, manage our emotions and the moments that we have and create a safe place for others, so that they can not feel wounded, scared, or defensive, because that immediately causes them to run into flight or fight mode. So, it's our responsibility. We got to take a little ownership for trying to make sure that it's safe for other people to participate in that discussion. And finally, I would say just there's probably more common ground than we realize. And if we just focus on what the difference is, it creates more tension. But finding that common ground that we can build this bridge from, I think, is really, really important too.
That's rich. The idea that we can choose to either think about our differences or think about our similarities. I think so often we think about our differences and we focus on those, and we can make not that they're not big deals sometimes, but we can sometimes focus way too much on them and seek that out. And so just find common ground, I think, is crucial, and something that I think we all need to maybe try a little bit more so to do, rather than thinking about what divides us. There's already too many things that divide us. We don't need more. We don't need more.
Natural.
Right. And so, but also you just saying courage and wisdom and love, and striking the balance and the tension. I think that's really, really good, really, really good. And so I don't know, you said courage, love, and compassion and candor, right? These words that you're throwing out are super good, and something that we should continue to think through. But what are some practices that one can pursue in pursuing a healthier, productive relationship atmosphere?
Yeah, I would say one practice would be, seeking out that common ground before focusing on the difference. That would be a practice. You can just do that. I would say also understand the picture that's being projected. So, in a dialogue, sometimes we get messed up in the words. And one example that I use, especially doing what I do for a living, is that just because somebody said a word doesn't mean that it means that. So when you think about when you think about the word cricket, for instance, just because somebody said cricket, there are some cultures where cricket is a pet. There are some places where it's a meal. There are some places where it's a game. There are some places where it's a pest. So just because somebody used the word cricket doesn't mean they understand it the same way that you do. And I think that when this whole idea of seeking to understand is that there's an image in my mind that I'm projecting to you, which is visual versus just the words. And I need to make sure that the other party understands that and I understand. So if somebody was to show the projection of each of our minds, that we're watching the same movie. Sometimes we're watching different movies, and I think that winds up creating some of the tension. It's not that we just got caught up in the words. So I would say just understand the picture being projected more than just the word choices that people make. And again, that just requires us to be authentically curious and not just wait for our turn to talk. Sometimes when we disagree with somebody, we're silent, pretending to listen, but really we're just waiting for our turn to talk, and that's wrong. You want to make sure that the other person actually feels heard, and that you actually successfully articulate their point of view in your own words, and take the time to confirm, is that accurate? Is that what you're saying to me? And I think that those practices will make a huge difference.
Couldn't agree more. And you even just said something that even can convict me, where it's like someone's talking, I'm having a dialogue with somebody, and I'm just thinking about, what can I say next? What's my rebuttal? How can I defend myself? Or how can I one up them?
Yep.
I do it
How
all
can
the
I
time.
win? How can I win? I want to win.
Yes.
Not preserve this relationship. I want to win.
And we do these things, and we're so guilty of them, and yet again, we're so quick to be entitled. We're so quick to throw out our opinions. And I think that, again, the some of the practices, again, you spoke towards, of finding the common grounds and boundaries of mutual respect, and just thinking through that, seeking to understand rather than be understood. Again, all these things that we're kind of now throwing out there as a rhythm within our conversation here. I just think that it's so necessary to continue to pursue, and even understand their language and their verbiage. As you use the cricket, right, as a fantastic example. And so knowing that there's a lot of there can be a lot of misinterpretations or miscommunications, and that how can we bridge that gap well? And so I think that's something to continue to process over. And so, even as we think about the whole concept of the influence experiment, is all about finding the arts and the science of building influential capacity. And so, what would you say is some of the science, the objective truth behind pursuing a healthy, productive, realistic, and culture? What's some of the arts, some of the subjective, personal expression behind pursuing a productive, healthy, realistic environment?
Yeah, I think when we understand that our ultimate success is personally or professionally, it's a product of the communities that we inhabit. And it changes the way we view relationships and community. And seeing what we didn't see before actually gives us choices that we didn't have
Hmm.
before. And then through acts of kindness, generosity, we can make our ordinary communities extraordinary. And that's something that we have the power to do. Listening and hearing, those are valuable gifts that we can give each other. And we're not omniscient. And the reality is being humble enough to be able to listen to somebody else and their perspective on a particular issue. It can broaden and enrich our perspectives. It increases our empathy and allows us to reflect our Lord better.
Hmm.
And when I think about the whole creating an environment of psychological safety and humility, this allows for having those crucial conversations I had mentioned a little bit earlier. And these are rich, valuable conversations that are only available in healthy relationships. And when it comes to these conversations broadly, you got three choices really. You can either avoid them and suffer the consequences. You can handle them badly and suffer the consequences, or you can handle it well and reap the rewards. And I think that that's going to be a profound impact not only on your life, but also for those other people in the world that we live in. And the art really comes in the fact that it is more like the skill of a craftsman creating unique and individual works based upon years of experience. It's about progress, not perfection, because it's going to require some failures. It's going to require our commitment to actually doing the work and trying to get it right. And I don't think that there's an answer that's like an easy mass production assembly line where you just do this and the outcome comes out. This is a little bit more nuanced, and it requires a little bit more commitment and a little bit more effort to make sure that you just stay focused on it.
Mm. I love that. I love that. Again, identifying that there is some objectivity to this, while there also is definitely some subjectivity around this whole conversation. And so, thank you for speaking so adequately into that. And so, why would you say is it's so crucial to make sure that you personally are healthy? Right, we're talking about this whole conversation of increasing a productive work environment, family environment, healthy environment, etc. But if you're not healthy, there could be some problems of trying to guide an organization or a team or a family, right? And so, why is it so crucial to make sure that you are healthy and realistic and productive in your own personal leadership and life?
Yeah, I would say that you can't. There's a reason that they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, because you can't help somebody else unless you're okay.
Yep.
And so I would say that sometimes you have to we are never ever accurately going to see the hypocrisy in ourselves.
Mhm.
So we have to create also a safe environment to be able to get some of that feedback from other
Yeah.
people and not become immediately defensive, because in some respects that's some of the oxygen you need in order to be better. So I would say that you have to be healthy in order to help others be healthy, and being able to be self-aware and embrace sometimes critical feedback, and realizing that there's some things that I need to do, and the reality is that you're going to have more credibility and influence if you do.
Hmm. No, is that the irony sometimes is at the moment that you like kind of receive the fact that there's some weakness or some blind spots, or the moment that you receive that and start trying to work through it is the moment you gain more credibility. Like the irony of that is like when you establish that you are fragile and weak, that people can like say, I've even seen this, like people say like, I can relate to you more now. Like I can trust you more because you're not just thinking you're some picture perfect person who has
Yeah.
it all together all the time, right? And
Yep.
so it's irony, but like it's beautiful at the same time, and a call for vulnerability, a call for humility, a call for not looking perfect, and so to making sure that our life is as healthy as we possibly can. It's never going to be perfectly healthy, but if we're making intentional strides towards that, I think it's a win across the board. And so,
Yeah.
but even continuing on this thought, like let's just say that you have you look at your family, you look at a team, you look at a friend group, you look at work environments, and you're acknowledging, man, there is some unhealthiness in your circumstances, in your team, family, et cetera, right now, and it's already embedded in there.
Mhm.
How would you go about? Uh, how would one go about unraveling that, combating against it, working towards healthiness? Like, what would you say if someone says, "Man, I already have this stuff already in my culture, in my family, and I want to do something about it"? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say, well, first start with the heart. Ask yourself, what do you really want, and what's at stake? And again, usually that's going to be something bigger than winning the argument. It's about preserving a relationship. It's about advancing an agenda that everybody wants to advance. So, start with the heart and really be able to define kind of what it is that you actually want and what's the big goal here. And again, conflict can actually strengthen bonds and relationships if it's done effectively and well. Second thing I would say is learn to look. Always ask yourself whether the conversation is defensive or a dialogue. Because again, that's gonna impact the quality of the conversation. And if you or the other party strays in defensiveness, simply just call it out. Hey, I think we've moved away from dialogue, or I'm sorry, I've been trying to force my ideas on you. And again, just create that space and just be self-aware. So learn to look at what's going on at the time, in the moment. I would say make it safe. Another way to deal with the defensiveness and difficult conversations is to, create comfortable situations by apologizing. Like I'm sorry, I've been trying to force my ideas on you, or asking a question that shows that authentic curiosity in the other's point of view. And sometimes it might even say, you know what, time out. We seems like we're a little hot and we need to probably take a little bit of a time out and just kind of separate for a bit, and let's agree to come back together and pick up where we are once the emotion is out of the room. um, I would say master your story. Focus on what happened that made you feel a certain way, because again, the emotions sometimes get in the way, and you got to think through your emotions and then choose the appropriate way to respond. um, so again, being able to actually articulate what the emotion is you're feeling, being able to put a name to it, is really, really powerful. If I'm just angry and I don't know why I'm angry, it's really hard for me to work through that. So,
Mm,
I have to become aware of what are the feelings that I'm feeling? What's going on in here? And you need to be able to understand that story to be able to pick it up and move it someplace else.
yeah.
So you have to be able to put a name on it. um, you have to state your path, which is another important thing. So, share those facts and conclusions so that the other party can see where you're coming from. Sometimes if somebody can't lead you out of the woods unless they know where you are, and you can't lead somebody else out of the woods unless you know where they are, so help somebody see. And, it's funny doing what I do for a living. When somebody makes a decision, and as a headhunter, everybody's trying to convince me that they're perfect. They're the perfect employee all the time. And one of the things that kind of is a known for me is that when somebody makes a decision, if it doesn't make sense to me, it's either they're lying to me or I just don't have all the facts, because for some reason it made sense to that person. And again, if you understand the fact that somebody might choose something different, but you got to take the time to understand their path, and you got to be able to share your path so they understand. Those are two things that you have to do. And then the final thing is really move to action. Come to consensus about what's going to happen next, and agree on who's going to do what, and settle on ways that you might be able to hold each other accountable. And I think that those are probably the most important steps to work through some of the conflict that might exist.
And I absolutely love that whole list that you gave. That honestly, that could turn into like a mini book or something. Everything that you just suggested off there. And so you said, just as a recap here, right? You mentioned to start with the hearts, and then to learn to look, to make it safe, to master your story, to state your path, to explore others' paths, and then to move to action. I love those steps. Thank you for articulating those. I hope that someone can hit the pause button, go back, maybe write down more of those things as steps that they could strive towards productiveness, healthiness, etc. And so, hey, would you say, Robert, if any like resources at all, that books, videos, articles, whatever, that maybe helps people if they want to pursue this conversation a little bit further?
Yeah, one book that I actually found very, very helpful was a book that was called Crucial Conversation: Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High.
Mm.
And that book was written by Carrie Patterson. So if you wanted
Mm.
to find that, you could just do a Google search on that.
Mm. No, and we'll make sure that if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll have it in the description. If you're watching this, you can find it on our Instagram page. We'll make sure that we have that link available for you to be able to check that book out. I personally haven't read it myself, and so now that you've suggested it, Robert, it's now going to be higher on my priority list to go check out. And so, man, Robert, this has been so good. I'm so encouraged by this whole conversation, challenged myself even as we seek to land the plane here. Any final words of wisdom and advice that you would give to our listeners as we conclude our time here?
The only other thing I would say is realize that we have actually less control than we realize, but we also have more influence than we realize. So don't be a victim of circumstances. Take the initiative and influence your circumstances and reflect the character befitting a living sacrifice and a fragrant offering for our Lord. That would be the final thing. And the circle that surrounds us for control is a lot smaller than we realize. We really think we control more than we do.
Yep.
But on the same token, we can influence a heck of a lot more than we realize we can. And again, don't be a victim.
Come on. We influence way more than we realize. I couldn't agree more. And so, man, Robert, thank you, dude. This has been so good, so rich, and I'm so thankful for you. Thank you for being a witness through your character, through your love for people, your love for Jesus, and being willing to speak candidly and compassionately through this conversation. I'm super grateful for you, man. So just thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Tony.
And if you are listening to this and you have enjoyed what you've heard, if you go back and listen to other episodes and you're liking what you're hearing, would you give us a rating? Would you hit the share button, the subscribe button, wherever you consume the content? That would make our day if you would go and do that. And so we hope that you will join us next time as we continue to explore the art and the science of building influential capacity. Catch you next time.